Well, looks like we're right at 1 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being on to another one of our superintendent huddles for tornado impacted districts. For today's agenda, what I'd like to do is just have an update from any of the impacted districts around new challenges that you may be experiencing. We knew that as we worked our way through the impacts and fallout from the tornado, there would be immediate effects, and then I think we recognized there would be some things where we didn't know what we didn't know yet, and so those may be evolving, and new information may be available. So interested in kind of how things are going and if any new needs have emerged in the last few weeks, just as some of you have gotten restarted on schooling, and just anything that's changed in your communities over that period of time. Then I'll hand things over to Robin Kinney. She's got information on the $30 million aid package that the legislature has passed and what that can be used for, and how that the funding on that will go. We also have been working to support the districts that have been more significantly devastated by the tornadoes around a second aid proposal that would really be pointed at trying to create some stability over the long term when it comes to funding and population loss and student enrollment loss and things of that nature. So Robin can update you on that. And then we have Tony, I think Cons Tatman is on, and she'll be able to update you some on the efforts that we have underway around recognizing staff and some of the heroes that we have in our communities, just as a suggestion that came out from the last meeting that we had. And then finally, I want to end up just talking about the next meeting like this. We've been having these about every 2 weeks, and we can talk some about, does that frequency still feel okay? Is this the right timing for us? And if so, we can meet again in a couple of weeks. So let's just start out by hearing from some of our tornado impacted districts how things are going, and are there any new needs that have emerged that we were unaware of up to this point? Now, I see, Lenny, that you're on. I wonder if I could volunteer you to go first. Oh, you're muted, Lenny.
How about now?
There you go.
All right, thanks. I was having some technical difficulties here. I think we got it fixed now. Well, right now we've been in school for, this is our third day back. We were in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Things seem to be going well. I mean, our students are glad to be back. It seems like at this time we had more students kind of come back than we anticipated may have, which is a good thing. But overall, things are going pretty well right now. We just can't get COVID or the weather to cooperate very well. But we're fortunate to be in today, and we're moving forward. I don't know that there's any real new challenges or obstacles that we're looking at, other than a lot of the discussions we've had in the past really need some legislative action on it.
Great, thanks, Lenny. And I see that we've got Gary on from Bowling Green, Amy Smith is here, Robert Davis here, in just any of the other districts that have been significantly impacted by the tornado. Anything new, or just an update on what's going on in your communities?
From Bowling Green, I'll just share, we're, I think we're in a routine, although we're out for a snow day again today. So we're struggling to get any rhythm for our kids. But yeah, the very few families that are still displaced, and we all got them in some at least semi-permanent housing, which is good, finding apartments and some other places for people to stay. So just now, and I know, Lenny and Joe and them, were obviously hit harder than we were. But, I think just now, some of the mental health ramifications, we're seeing, even staff members having their houses bulldozed down to rebuild. And just it's really surreal to see that happening for staff and students. So I think we're just trying to work through that, and that'll be something ongoing that we will have to work through on top of just the pandemic, mental health needs. So, but we're hanging in there, and the support's been, incredible, and we appreciate that.
Great, Gary. Well, we may have some good news on this initial aid package that may be able to help on the mental health front. Any of the other superintendents that are on, just want to update on what's going on in your communities or any emerging needs, some new needs that you may have?
Well, Commissioners, Robbie Davis, I pretty much echo what the other two fellows here have said. Housing is still remains, it's going to be, it is and will be a huge issue. And my worry going forward again is, you know, some of the legislative stuff hopefully will help with that, but that we may not have some, we may lose several kids for a while or altogether. That's the worry. But I will say an encouraging thing, Bremen was the #1 school affected, certainly our middle and high school as well. The first day back, that we got to come back after Christmas, after New Year's, the highest percentage of attendance was there. And that shows you how much they wanted to be back and have that structure and see their staff members. You know, it was a wonderful day when we got back. But like Gary said, what's hard is seeing the bus rides out through there and over and seeing just a totally different landscape and buildings going down. So the mental health thing is a big thing. But all in all, we're moving forward, you know, as best we can.
That's great. Thanks, Robbie. I appreciate that update and the concerns around the longer term impacts around housing and around local tax collections and how that may disrupt attendance and funding over the long haul. I think is one of the things that Robin wants to talk about, some proposed legislation around that. Just any other districts that are on that want to speak out about how things are going in your community or any new needs that you may have that emerged over the last few weeks.
This is Amy Smith, Hopkins County, and I just like Robbie, I echo everything that has already been said. The thing I was going to mention, I guess, was what Robbie had stated about those bus rides and our staff driving to work every day and that path headed. I had a principal tell me recently, you know, he said, I'm in a normal routine when I leave my house headed to Hopkins County Central. But once I hit a certain point, my whole demeanor changes because of the view that I continue to see day in and day out with the devastation. So the mental health, I think, is a huge piece for us as well and will continue to be. But we're still getting people reaching out to us with resources and we're fortunate and we're not hit near as hard as Lenny, who's right down the road from me, and we just commend all of you all on what you continue to do to support our needs in our school district. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Amy. And so some of you heard about my own family story with tornado devastation, and I can tell you that with just re-experiencing this through the lenses of my parents' eyes, grief takes its own timeline, and some things can happen and trigger and put you right back in the moment that you were in when some of your staff members and people in your community experience some of the most traumatic, horrible things that they will have ever seen, and that may come back again and again. It cycles through. So I expect that we'll be dealing with those sort of grieving and recurrence of trauma issues for some time to come. Any other superintendents on that want to just update us? Otherwise, we'll turn to Robin next. But we'll pause here just to see if there's anyone else that wants to update from our community. Thanks, Amy and Robbie and Gary and Lenny, for sharing your community stories.
Commissioner, just one thing that I'll add, and Gary brought this up, the housing situation. I don't know if the folks that are directly impacted with this are aware, but I've been told that there's supposed to be FEMA trailers through the state. It's supposed to be coming to some various communities. From what I understand, the potential's there for us to have some in Dawson Springs, maybe down at Penny Rowell at the RV portion of the park, maybe in the next couple weeks. So, you know, we're going to need a bunch of those, and I'm sure other folks will as well, but at least that'll be something that some folks that we've got that are a ways out from Dawson Springs will hopefully be able to get a little bit closer if everything goes as planned. And I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I don't have any information on FEMA, but we'll just pause and see if anyone else that's on here. It's like Robin is going to be our go-to person on a lot of information around aid and services. Robin, let's go ahead and turn things to you. And I wonder if you could talk some about the $30 million package that's been passed, what the components of it are, what we're thinking about in terms of how applications for that look and timeline related to it. And then I'll ask you to touch on the legislation that you've been working on around the long-term stabilization. And then just finally, if you have any information on the FEMA supports that Lenny talked about, or any other supports that you're aware of. So we'll turn things over to you and make this the Robin Show for the next few minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a pleasure to be back on with you again this afternoon. I'm going to start off talking about Senate Bill 25, which has already become law. It has already been signed by the governor, and that is the West Kentucky State Aid Funding for Emergencies, or you may hear it referred to as the SAFE Fund. And this is funding that is to assist both school districts, but also in larger communities that have been impacted by the storms and tornadoes. Out of that, $155 million has been appropriated, and there is $45 million that is going to be accessible more immediately. That is $30 million that is coming to the Kentucky Department of Education to support school districts impacted. And that immediate $30 million can be used for limited purposes. So it can be used for wraparound services for children and families, mental health services, counseling, tutoring, any of those types of wraparound services for your students and families. The second thing it can be used for is to assist those school districts that have additional transportation costs, where you're trying to transport your children that have been displaced and you have an increased transportation cost. I know that our districts and neighboring districts have really rallied around each other to really work hard. And I guess I'm much more familiar with the specific steps taken by Dawson Springs and Mayfield, because I've had a lot of conversations with them. But I know all of the districts that have been impacted have had certain numbers of families and their students that have been displaced. And so you may have additional transportation costs associated with getting those kids back for in-person instruction. So this $30 million that will be available more immediately can be used to help you with those increased costs. Then the third thing out of that $30 million, we can at the Department of Education transfer a portion of the funds to the School Facilities Construction Commission to help with the funding of either repairs or damage to your buildings, to your school buildings that suffered damage. So those are the three things that you would have more immediate access to funds to support. We do, and then also out of that initial $45 million, there is $15 million to the Department of Military Affairs to be used for procuring temporary FEMA eligible housing units. And as I was asking about that, I don't know if Superintendent Henderson from Mayfield is on today, but he did share with me that he has already received a reach out from Military Affairs and FEMA asking about temporary eligible housing. So what they're trying to determine is first, families in your areas that have children, school-aged children, and trying to kind of prioritize them out of this $15 million pot of money. So I would be interested, because I was not aware of that until Superintendent Henderson told me that they had reached out to him. I would be interested if anyone else has heard from Military Affairs or FEMA related to that. If not, I'll try to get you all a contact name so that I can invite someone from FEMA onto one of our future webcasts, if that would be helpful. Also in Senate Bill 25, the rest of the money that's not coming to the Department of Education for those specific uses or to Military Affairs for those FEMA temporary housing, is going to the Department of Military Affairs, a Division of Emergency Management. That other pot of money, there will be opportunities, because local school districts are also an eligible applicant into that pot of money. And it has specific requirements around it about what it can be used for. But just some of the things that I know we were interested in that might be able to be paid from that pot of money is reimbursement for services, personnel, and equipment provided during the response and recovery to any communities impacted by the storm. So I know we had some of our districts that were having some expenditures just right when it happened, either to try to house people, not house people, but to set up locations for a point of service to deliver services or goods or cleaning that you had to do. So that would be another eligible expense. But I will share with you that pot of money will not be immediately available. So we are trying to learn more about that. We will also, that is not just limited to school districts, that can be applicants. So you've got the eligible to receive from that fund are cities and counties, urban county governments, nonprofits, public service, utility service providers, state agencies, or school districts. So the sphere of people that can apply is a lot greater. Of course, pot's a little bit bigger too, but there will be an opportunity for us to apply for certain costs out of that. So let me stop there and see if anyone has any questions about those two pots of money. I will say, because the $30 million will be immediately available, it is difficult for us, just like it's difficult for you to understand how much is going to be needed. So out of that first pot of money, of course, we have $30 million, and we have envisioned there will be I'm going to call it an application process, but it's really to collect information from our districts, specifically starting with those three eligible uses out of the 30 million. We envision something that would be very simple, that would just track Senate Bill 25, ask you about your needs and dollar amounts for each of the permissible uses. And then we'll talk through some process questions. I know that many of you, as you've worked with some of or you've had neighboring districts help you with these additional transportation costs, I think what we envision, because we'll need to disperse to districts that have actually been declared an emergency under the disaster. So if you have a neighbor district that is helping you with some of this and they're not one of the declared districts, then what we'll need to do is they'll need to bill you for that additional transportation cost that they are incurring, and then they'll send us the bill, then we'll pay you back, and then you can pay your neighbor that's helping you. That's the only way that we can really keep it straight, that the money's only flowing to the tornado impacted districts. But we'll work through those processes and have as simple as possible application for you all to start telling us how much you need. Also identifying potential damage to your buildings so that we can start trying to get a handle on how much we would need to send to SFCC to help with that piece. So we got a few moving parts here, but we would like to get the application to you as quickly as possible. We're trying to think if that's a GMAP thing that you submit through GMAP or we collect it some other way. But I think by the time that we meet next again, if we stay on this 2-week cycle, we'll have a lot more information to share so that we can provide that to you. You can start submitting what you need and we can start processing checks. Let me stop there for just a minute and see if anyone has any other questions about Senate Bill 25.
Looks like Lenny has a question.
Hey, Lenny.
Hey, Robin. Hey, just real quick, Robin, do you envision, and we really hadn't had a chance, we talked a little bit about this, but do you guys think you're going to have some pretty wide flexibility on some of those monies, or do you think you're going to be pretty tight, or are you guys going to be pretty flexible on those?
We will try to be as flexible as the language in the bill permits us to be. I know it has to fall into those big categories that we've talked about. There's also some language on the mental health wraparound services that will probably, but the transportation, additional transportation cost seems to be pretty wide. So we'll be able to help with that. Okay.
Hey, Robin, this is Gretchen from WKC. I know Joe will probably have a question about the transportation piece. So when they submit, they can submit more than one time because the billing will probably occur for quite a while. So
Absolutely.
do you see that being an application that remains open and they can keep submitting?
Yeah, I definitely, it's going to take us some while. And so, as we start back to school, if you all can kind of share with us, and again, we're still working on the application to make it make sense for you all and for us, but if you can kind of guesstimate what it might be for the rest of the school year, that might be the easiest way. And then every time you submit an invoice, you will just hit against that amount that you've told us previously. But we'll probably take it through the school year. And then this money does not lapse. So it can continue into the next school year and the following school year. So that money will be there until the end of the biennium. Okay. So, Commissioner, I'm going to jump right into in the interest of time, but we're going to jump into, as I said, I think Senate Bill 25 was a good start, but it still leaves some gaps. It leaves gaps on sort of the long-term, how you're going to sustain some of this, and while you're waiting to rebuild and restore your communities. So we have drafted sort of some language that the General Assembly could consider. If you look at House Bill 285, which is the governor's recommended budget, we're in a wonky time here. We got two budgets that have already been filed. We've got House Bill 1, which we're calling the House budget, and then we've got House Bill 285, which is the governor's recommended budget. If you look in the governor's recommended budget, you'll see some language that has been put in by the governor that kind of tries to help with this concept of seek funding for tornado impacted districts and looking forward. So if we'll remember together for the next school year, starting in the fall, we're frozen still, right? Because we're still under the COVID kind of freeze. So what we were looking for was something that as people started collecting data next school year and the next school year, which is the 2 years in the biennium, that this would allow you all some relief if you choose. So you have to make an election. You have to decide that this language would be better for you than if you just go back, because maybe you have students that have come back and it's better for you to just count the regular way. Let me say it that way. So it is completely optional, but what it would do is it would allow you as a district, if it's better for you to do it this way, it would allow you to basically freeze everything again. And it would freeze at whatever ADA you're using for this year. Whatever you're using for this year. So if you picked 18-19, you'd freeze again there. If you picked 19-20, you'd freeze again there. And it also allows you to freeze actual counts. So all your add-ons, so your exceptional children, your at-risk, all those other counts that we use, actual counts, it will give you the ability to freeze that as well. Because if you're losing students, you would also be losing in all those add-ons, potentially. So it allows you to do that too. And so that is sort of, it would allow you that opportunity for 2 more years if you want it. So that would take your funding through the first year, as long as the General Assembly didn't come in and do something different. It would allow that funding to be frozen again all the way into the first year of the subsequent biennium. So we have asked, based upon district's request, we've asked for you for sort of this hold harmless for up to 5 years. That was the request of our districts. The budget bill lasts 2 years. So we've also asked, if you can't give them 5 years, could you put sort of some intent language in there? It is our intent to be able to go up to 5 years to kind of hold harmless. So that's probably the first thing that we heard from districts. The other thing that we heard very loudly was this concept of lost local revenue. And, we're concerned because our properties are maybe assessed a lot lower. They're not there. We don't know about the timing of our PVAs, how quickly it's going to take them or how slowly it's going to take them to reassess. So we asked that they consider that those lost revenues be able to be paid from the $30 million from the SAFE fund. So because we know from now until the end of the school year, districts may have loss in those local revenues. So we've asked, you can either do a separate appropriation, so that's one thing that they could do to take care of that, or just allow us access to at least the 30 million and possibly the higher pot. So that's our request to help with, and again, for a long period of time. We've also asked for, we are pursuing and asking for any extraordinary expenses that you may have. We know that there are some things that you have insured. They may be underinsured, and you may have to replace something, and now it costs a lot more than what you got insurance proceeds for. So we would like something that would allow, again, to pay out of that 30 million pot or out of a separate appropriation for those extraordinary expenses for either uninsured or underinsured. We've also put together language to ask for disaster days, up to 10 disaster days upon the approval of the Commissioner of Education, depending on how many, were needed, but up to 10. And then we've also asked for relief from contract days. So both of those, and districts could waive up to 10 contract days for your own staff if that's needed. And then finally, we did hear there was a little bit of concern about your staff that may need to meet with insurance adjusters, or maybe meet with attorneys, or do something directly impacted by the storms. And we ask that you be able, through your boards of education, to provide up to 3 additional emergency days if you so choose. So that would be the local school district's decision on whether you choose to grant that or not, but it would grant you that flexibility to do so. Those are kind of the big pieces. We're hearing other ancillary things from our districts, but these are the ones that we are trying to get in front of the General Assembly through either the budgetary process that, obviously has just started, or through a separate bill or a separate appropriation. Let me pause there for a minute and see if anyone has any questions.
I'd just make one comment, and then I know that Lenny's got a question just coming up. What we've tried to do is just listen to the districts that were most directly impacted and then craft a starting point for legislation based on what they told us they needed. So of course, it'll be up to the legislature to decide, what if anything they ultimately want to do. But that was our starting point, is just what do you need, and let's craft legislation based on that. Lenny, go right ahead.
Commissioner, I was going to ask you and Robin, if we wanted to go ahead and request X amount of disaster and X amount of emergency days, even though it may be above the 3 that's allotted right now, would you recommend us doing that so that it would be known publicly, that we've asked for assistance in that realm? Or are we better off just kind of holding back and see what happens as far as legislative action?
Well, I think it sounds like the reason that you'd want to ask for more is just to be on the record stating the case that you needed more, right? So I don't think it hurts you to ask for what's beyond that. We'll just have to respond with what we can do. But you would be on the record as having asked for what you needed. So I think that's okay.
I'm just not going to be able to give you a very good answer right now.
Yeah, Robin, this is Gary. So that, the days of what do we do with that? For us, it was just a week, but it was a unique week, obviously for everybody. But I guess once this gets to a point where we feel like legislation is moving or we can help, then I think, and I'm sure you will, but involve us. We obviously we have Senator Wilson and leadership can be a big help on the Senate side, and at least from our area. So
well,
if we know how it's going to happen, we can get involved and push from our end.
So Brian Perry is our new legislative liaison here at the Department of Education, and he has a document in hand, which I am very happy to share with all of you so that you can kind of see. It's really in two parts. The first part is sort of like paragraphs explaining sort of the problem. And then the second part is some first attempt at drafted language. So we're happy to share that with all of our impacted districts so you can take a look at it and to use that with your legislators. Brian has I think I got it to him yesterday or the day before, and so he is already starting to have some of those conversations. But I'm sure probably the more people that can spread the word and the information of the needs, it's very helpful. And I will share, it's always, always, always more impactful when our districts are saying it rather than us.
Yeah, sometimes when we say it, it's actually counterproductive. So you should be the one that makes the ask.
Gary, just to chime in there a little bit, I've had a whole lot. Well, actually, I went to Frankfurt for the drive-in last week, and I probably spoke to between 6 and 8 senators, my current senator, and then other senators that I knew just from, my prior life. But talked to 6 or 8 senators and probably close to 10 representatives in both chambers. And I did brief Mike Wilson literally in 30 seconds. So if you had a chance, Gary, to run by him, he would be a big ally. I've also been speaking very actively to Max Wise. And there's a lot churning right now. I mean, those folks know what's going on as far as needs and things. And like I've shared with Robin and the commissioner, what's important to me is until I see something in writing, until I see a bill that folks can start looking at, tweaking, at least talking about, I'm going to be sleeping with one eye open until that's done. So I know that there's a lot of people working on that, and anything that anybody can do to talk to their senators and representatives is going to go a long way. I know everybody I talked to has been receptive, said we're going to help. So now it's just a matter of trying to get somebody to carry that water, if you will.
Great. Thanks, Lenny. Well, I think our next steps are really to share out what we've got as far as the concept with you, and then make sure that we've got the structure of that right. We can start working with all of you on who might be someone to introduce this. If we've got people in leadership that can do that, even better. That helps move it forward, and then we can work from there toward advocacy on your part, and we'll do what we can, of course, to help get something done for you. Okay, thank you, Robin. Any other items that you want to touch on?
I think that's enough.
All right, well, it's really impactful. Thanks for all the work on that, Robin. We wanted to turn things quickly over to Tony just to update you on some communications ideas. Thanks, Gary, for the idea to just sort of highlight some of the heroes that you have locally and some of those stories. So Tony's been doing some of that work since we talked last. I'll give her just a few minutes to update you on where that effort is and next steps.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Just to give you an update, so my office just finished up writing a resolution that we have handed over to the General Assembly. I spoke with Senator Wise last week, and I believe we're right now planned on getting that either the 26th or the 27th. Worked with, talked to Gretchen. I know that she's having several superintendents are going to be in Frankfurt for a meeting. And so as soon as I have that date and time scheduled, every superintendent with an impacted district is mentioned in this resolution. It was very important for us to make sure that you are mentioned, as are your staff, and we worked in specifics. So as you all have shared stories with us, we have kind of incorporated that into this 3-page resolution, tried to just give examples of some of the heroic work that was done. So that you all can be kind of recognized on the Senate and House floors. I think that's a good step there. In addition, we have received some stories that we're going to be sharing. Some student written. Gary from Bowling Green, one of your students had written a really neat article we're going to see about publishing that in Kentucky Teacher, just different perspectives. Also some examples from Muhlenberg County, Christian County. I've heard from several of you all, so thank you so much for all of that. We're working on getting together all of those pieces. We have an upcoming Kentucky Board of Education meeting. I see Lou Young is on the call. We're going to work on doing several pieces, gathering everything together, just so everybody just keeps this in the forefront of all the work that you all have worked on doing. And then in addition, the February, the Jason's, Dr. Glass's PTA column that he is working on right now focuses a lot of the storytelling of what happened in the work of our educators in the aftermath of the tornadoes. I think that a lot of you will see a lot of examples from your districts in those as well. So just keep up the good work. I know you all are going through a lot right now. It seems like we're getting hit, kind of hit on the head from one disaster to a weather to COVID and everything. And we're doing our best to try to keep your spirits high, and just let me know what else we can do from the communications department.
Thanks, Tony, and keep those good stories coming Tony's way, just on any things that you've got going on in your community that you want to make sure that lifted up and highlighted. Just in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and close out this huddle. It sounds like we need to meet in a couple of weeks just to catch up on some of the moving parts that we've got in the interim. We'll work on getting that information out around the application process for Senate Bill 25, get that information to you, as well as just the bones of what we're thinking, what we've heard as far as needs for ongoing funding stabilization. We'll work on getting that out to you in the interim as well. I'll stop here and just see if anybody else has any other points you want to raise. Otherwise, we'll cut you loose for the rest of the afternoon. Okay, thanks everybody.